In our next session, we are very pleased to have our keynote speaker, Professor Nancy Law, from the Faculty of Education at Hong Kong U, to provide us some insight from and beyond COVID-19. A little bit about Professor Nancy Law. Professor Nancy Law is a professor in the Faculty of Education at the University of Hong Kong. She served as the founding director for the Center for Information Technology in Education, SITE as we know it, for 15 years from 1998. She also led the Science of Learning Strategic Research Team at the University of Hong Kong. She's a fellow of the International Society of the Learning Science and is known globally for her strong record and expertise in the integration of digital technology in learning and teaching to promote student-centered pedagogical innovation. And as we are desperate need her advice at the moment. So thank you, Professor Nancy Law.
Thank you. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So thanks so much for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts and experiences in terms of e-learning during this time and thinking forward. First of all, I really like the theme of this forum. We focus on the relationship between learners and teachers in this focusing around learning. So for us as teachers, obviously we need to be thinking, first of all, about how people learn. So how do people learn? The answer to this question actually depends on what do we want the students to learn. If we want students to learn simple knowledge and skills, that's relatively easy. We probably only need to tell them the information or show them how to do and give them some practice exercises, that would be done. But if we want them to learn complex knowledge and complex skills, then we need to be understanding more about what the learner actually knows and what kind of problems they have. And we probably need to do some diagnostics and design some more in-depth experiences for them to be able to master these complex knowledge and skills. But what if we want the students to solve new problems and create new knowledge? Then we need to be able to identify or design some problem context or work with the learners to develop and identify problem context and also to provide them with suitable resources or support or partners to solve these problems. What if what we want the students to learn is not just knowledge and skills, but also we want to think about what we want them to become? If we want them to become entrepreneurs, they need to develop the passion, the sense of self-actualization, the courage to take risks, and we want them to become world-class professionals, then they need to develop the deep insights, outstanding analytical ability, and the commitment to make a difference. If we want them to become advocates for the disadvantaged, they need to develop the sense of social responsibility, they need to be a great communicator, and they also need to be builders of networks. And no matter what we want them to become, they need to have leadership. They need to be able to lead horizontally to influence their peers and work with their peers on accomplishing a mission. They also need to be able to influence and communicate with their superiors and subordinates to work together. They also need to be able to work with people in other institutions, in other organizations, whether they are peers or different professionals and so on. So if we want our students to be learning all this, to be able to be building all these capacities, what are the conditions for accomplishing this kind of learning? Well, it's easy. They don't only need air and 3 C's. So they need, the learning interactions have to be active, interactive, and reflective. And we want the learning interactions to be collaborative, constructive, and critical. So for accomplishing this kind of learning, the students we need to be designing learning experiences, and the experiences for them to be doing them as individuals, in groups, and in networks. And we want to provide them with guidance and opportunities for reflections on their learning experiences. So for us as learning designers, I like to see myself as a teacher primarily as a learning designer. So we need to design learning interactions within learning environments, which encompasses both physical, digital, and social environments. And to do this, we need to be designing, providing resources, tools, and also fostering the appropriate kind of learning culture. And to make these all coherent, I like to be designing a mission and tasks for my students. And I've also developed a framework, the Learning Design Triangle, to guide this kind of learning design. The triangle comprises, first of all, the learning outcomes that we need to identify for the particular course or unit or module. And then we also need to be identifying the kind of disciplinary practice. So what do we want the students to become? That's the practice. And then we also need to be identifying the appropriate inquiry approach. Say, for example, if this is a course for medical practitioners, then oftentimes we know that, say, for example, prompt-based learning is a very popular pedagogical approach. But if we want to be, say, focusing on helping engineers for looking at design and communication, perhaps experiential learning would be more appropriate. And so after deciding on this triangle, then we design the sequence of learning tasks and environments. This learning design triangle is in fact guided by 3 important learning design principles. The curriculum needs to be based on outcome-based curriculum design. The disciplinary practice has to be associated with authentic tasks connected to a meaningful mission for the students. And then the pedagogical approach should be a productive process for knowledge creation. And then based on this, we then design a continuum of online and offline interactions that provide explorations mediated by tools and resources. And to make this more concrete, I'm just going to use the course that I'm teaching in my Master of Science in IT and Education program. The title of the course is Information Technology and Educational Leadership. So the mission I designed for my student is that they are going to be working as experts in a national consultancy team to draft a white paper for an online learning strategic plan, which is to address current and future development needs beyond COVID-19. And each group of students decide on the country or the system that they want to do their white paper on. So some of my students have chosen California, some chose Ontario, some chose Hong Kong, some chose Taiwan, and so on. So in my design, first of all, I asked myself, what do I want my students? So who are the e-leaders? So because some of my students are sort of part-time students who are practitioners, and some of them are full-time students. So they choose a role for them to do in this expert group. And then the context is that they are going to solve the problem that many places are facing in providing, for this kind of learning under uncertain times. And so they are working in a think tank. And so after designing this mission, I then try to organize the whole course and aligning the knowledge, the disciplinary knowledge and skills, and also the generic knowledge and the appropriate sort of attitude and so on, in terms of aligning with the stages of working on this white paper. So after designing this whole structure of the course, then of course I need to be thinking about the learning environment. Now, of course, before when I was teaching this course, we have a very nice, physical environment in the faculty that I can sort of, and I'm very familiar with, and I can work with my students. Now, I need to be thinking about what kind of environment can I create, or do I need to create for my students? So one of the things I think about is, how can I create a conducive social environment? I don't want to lecture to my students. I cannot lecture them to become a leader. So they need to have the, the comfortable feeling that we are in a group, we are chatting. And so the first session, the first meeting, I've never met them. So I need to think about what they are feeling. And I think it would be nice for us to share our feelings. So I search for a tool which allows me to get them to very quickly type, just a couple of words, and they are shown on the word cloud. And then everybody can see it, and then I can say, hey, who is thinking that this is crazy? Tell me what is crazy. Or why are you excited? So that becomes, a few minutes of warming up makes a big difference. And then, of course, I want them to be working in groups. And normally, when they're working in groups, they would be, say, maybe with sort of flip charts or different kind of whiteboards or whatever. So I need to be able to give them a similar environment. And I was very happy to be able to find an interactive whiteboard where, so my students were split into different breakout groups in Zoom, but then they're all together in this interactive whiteboard. Each group would have a space, and so you can actually see they were working, and they see each other, so they can see other groups working on their space. So they have this kind of awareness, which is very important. And the whiteboard also provides a discussion agenda for them to be working on. And then I'm actually working with my colleagues to develop a kind of like a design tool, which would help us as designers to think more carefully and about this whole complexity of design. So we need to be designing for individual, group, peer, and whole class interactions. So normally I would have to think about what I want my students to do before they come to class. So say, for example, I need them to be doing the reading summary. Where do I want them to do it? And then, so now I use the Moodle. I want them to be planning their presentations in groups, so they would have a space for their own construction. They have peer assessment of their reading summary, and they also have their whole class discussion forum. After class, they can also use the Zoom to review and so on. And in the middle, during the class, so I have to be looking at, for the whole class, the warming up, the group presentation, and also and then for the peer assessment and for the breakout group and so on. So this is the kind of sorts of work and the kind of principles that have been guiding me in terms of my work as a learning designer in designing learning experiences and environments for students as my learning partners and also as our future leaders. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Professor Law. I'm mindful of time, but I do have some questions. One of the attendees asked, right? Do you think online teaching is actually effective, right? And because they feel like they're struggling. I mean, some universities probably feel like struggling. So, how do you, help them, and what suggestion would you have?
Yes, I think we all like to see warm bodies around, me included. But if it's not possible, then obvious, and I think one of the big challenges is, the environment. So I think I'm very blessed that, say, the university has very quickly given us, everyone, including the students, the Zoom, which makes so much difference. And then this semester we have the Zoom actually integrated into the Moodle, which makes a huge difference. Yesterday, I received an email from ITS saying that we can actually have a sort of midterm review to get the students' feedback on their online learning experience. So right away, because it's so easy, I just click it and started it, and I send an email to my students. This morning, I already see some feedback. And so I think at the institutional level, providing the right infrastructure and then the right kind of support for us to know, so how do we map the different kinds of learning interactions into the sorts of virtual space. And in some cases, the virtual space is actually not too bad. I've been sort of asking my students before I meet them, I said, I feel very lonely as a teacher in front of a screen. So if you can, I would really appreciate if you turn on your camera. And I find that most of them, most of the time, they actually turn it on. And they have their names right next to their photos. And so, or the camera. And so I actually now remember all the faces. I can call them by name. Jimmy, why are you smiling, sort of thing. And so we do have a very nice sort of conversation.
Thank you very much for your insights, Professor Law. You are totally right. I think having students' voices are very important. In fact, I have a attendee here actually asked about student as learning partner, what we should do in terms of the design. And this is exactly what's happening in our next session.